So we know there are people who traveled quite a ways to come here today, and if anyone in that boat, that category feels moved to speak, please just take this opportunity, and there'll be more opportunity later.
Is Providence far enough away?
That's pretty far. Go.
Providence, New York.
It is considered one of our airports, so maybe it's not.
Okay, you'll have to bear with me for two, because I have one from the organizations in Bhopal who wrote a tribute, and one from Satyu himself, who you probably all know. Yes, in the middle?
Yeah, you're done with the middle. Also, tell us who you are.
Oh, I'm Ron Dewar, and I've been volunteering in Bhopal since 2002, and going there every year for a couple of months. And I made wonderful friends in Bhopal. So this is from the survivors' organizations. Organizations of survivors of the Union Carbide disaster in Bhopal and their supporters remember Ward Morehouse with much fondness, admiration, and deep gratitude. Sorry. For 27 years, Ward played a key role in inspiring and gathering international support for our struggle for justice and a life of dignity. Ward was one of our strongest and oldest supporters who made the Bhopal struggle his own. When early efforts failed to bring together a large number of groups in the U.S. to lend support to the survivors of Bhopal, it was Ward who almost single-handedly coordinated the support base in the U.S. From its tiny office in New York, his organization, the Bhopal Action Resource Center, articulated our position in U.S. media, kept an eye on our case in the U.S. court from 1985 to 86, and energized solidarity networks among trade unions, environmental groups, and other victimized communities. All actions that were difficult, if not impossible, for us living in Bhopal. By bringing together some of the most powerful voices in the labor unions and the environmental justice movement in the U.S., Ward spearheaded our battle for justice in Bhopal, in the belly of beast. Following the shocking and unjust settlement between Union Carbide and the Indian government in 1989, Ward organized the first international campaign tour of 4 countries, USA, UK, Ireland, and the Netherlands, to gather global support against the sellout. With very limited resources, he built up the International Coalition for Justice in Bhopal by contacting and uniting supporters in these countries, as well as Hong Kong and Japan. For a large part of U.S. campaign tour, Ward drove the Bhopal delegation across several states, sometimes driving 10-hour stretches. When the Indian Supreme Court judge who sanctioned the settlement sought nomination for a second term in the International Court of Justice, it was Ward and his colleagues in the ICJ-IB who successfully opposed the move. The continued failure of both Indian and U.S. judiciary to provide any semblance of justice moved Ward to organize hearings on the industrial and environmental hazards by the Permanent People's Tribunal at the Yale Law School in Bangkok, Bhopal, and London from 1990 to 1994. He authored and co-authored some of the earliest and most important books on the Bhopal disaster and its aftermath. The Bhopal Tragedy in 1986, Abuse of Power in 1990, and the Bhopal Leader in 2004. Ward took part in almost all the annual general meetings of Union Carbide and later the Dow Chemical Company. At these meetings, he articulated the voice of Bhopalis, our voice, with spontaneity, vigor, and biting sarcasm. Until his last days, Ward continued to be involved with international meetings, campaign tours, and speaking out at national and international gatherings on the Bhopal issue. With his humility, long experience, and fierce commitment to democratic values and our cause, Ward was the ideal person to lay the groundwork for solidarity across borders for the Bhopal issue. We, the Bhopal survivors, will forever miss his political insights, combative spirit, and most of all, his warm heart. That is on the part of Rashida B., who's head of a stationary workers' trade union in Bhopal. 50 Muslim women and 50 Hindu women after the disaster got trained by the government to do stationary work. And then the government dropped them. They formed a union and petitioned, and now there's a factory where they support their families and get commissions on government stationery. And Balakrishna Namdeo, who helps old people, widows, and other survivors. Satina Sarangi, and Rachna Dinga, both members of the Bhopal Group for Information and Action based in Bhopal, that continues to provide support to the struggle by the survivors' organizations. And Safreen Khan, who helped a young woman who leads an organization of children who have been affected by illnesses and birth defects due to this disaster and due to the contamination of local groundwater by Union Carbide, recklessly dumping hazardous waste. So the effects are now in the second generation, tragically. This is from Satu. Can you bear with me for another minute? 2 days ago, you have to imagine that I'm tall, dark, and handsome. A red turban on my head, wrapped in his particular fashion. 2 days ago, I spoke on the ongoing disasters in Bhopal to about 800 students at an engineering college in Tamil Nadu, South India. The Bollywood actor and social activist Rahul Bose, who spoke after me on ways to handle fear, did a great job of communicating with the young audience and encouraging each member of the audience to build, or rather discover within, his or her individual moral compass. He told them, imagine you had died. How would you like your best friend to describe you? There was much consensus. There was as much consensus as you can have with an auditorium full of young people on just, kind, fair, honest, smart, trustworthy, confident. Interrupting a few eager hands, Bose said that the things you wanted to be remembered most by were the most important elements of an individual's moral compass. Qualities of Ward that are uppermost in my mind are his passion, his sense of equality, and living his life by his convictions. Long before I met him, Ward was described to me by people in Bhopal who heard him speak at the first anniversary of the disaster as the big American man who was passionately against U.S. corporations and governments. This was at a time when, for understandable reasons, Americans, particularly white American males, were undesirables among the populace. Such was the prevailing climate, in fact, that foreign correspondents had stones rained on their cars. So Ward made an incredible impression. And here was a man who had won the hearts of Bhopalis by his politics and the passion with which he practiced it. Morehouse raved against the U.S. government and U.S. corporations while condemning Union Carbide, one of the local Hindi newspapers reported. After I met him, and more so after I spent the better part of 2 months with him, driving us, the Bhopal delegation, through several states, addressing rallies, taking part in local protests, speaking to the media, meeting with trade unionists, activists, community organizers, then I got a real sense of the passion that Ward had in him, that he lived life. I saw him close, preparing for a showdown with the man at the Houston AGM of Union Carbide, and I watched from the beginning to end his cannibalizing 3 malfunctioning telephones to yield one functioning instrument in a motel in Berkeley, and was struck by the adolescent intensity that characterized both activities. I said adolescence. I correct myself. It is an ageless passion, a passion undiminished through the 23 years that I have known him closely. Personally, for me, Ward has been, without his, of course, his ever knowing it, my mentor in the act of growing old. If one could grow old and be as rabid and radical and outrageous as Ward was, I would think growing old needn't be an unexciting place to be. The other quality in Ward that I found most endearing and inspiring is his sense of equality. In all the years that I have known him, I have not heard him mention being a former professor at NYU at any of his public interactions. The way he spoke at meetings, the words he chose, the way he moved his body, People knew that this white man wished to be counted as an equal, as one of them. One time, Ward had a very bad pain in his knees, and yet he decided to join the anniversary rally in Bhopal, passing through the mass graves near the cremation grounds of those killed in December 1984, and ending near the abandoned Union Carbide factory. It is a long walk for the several thousand people in the rally. Halfway down the road, I found Ward's limp getting more and more pronounced. With chants going on the PA system, it was not possible to be heard. So I walked up to Ward. I signed to him to get into an auto rickshaw carrying the PA system. In reply, Ward pointed his finger at a man with one leg who was marching in the rally on his crutches. The way he communicated, the way he was with people much younger than him, the way he sought camaraderie in the place of respect for age and wisdom, it never made one feel unequal due to age. People knew that around Ward one could be oneself, that one needed not alter one's words or appearance or conceal one's vices. What is amazing about Ward is his perseverance. While things were difficult for the Bhopalis, they could at least derive comfort in numbers and rejoice over small victories. Ward fought the Bhopal battle with a tiny group of people in a hostile environment. If an action did not produce the desired result, Ward would find another. When the U.S. court dealt out justice favoring the corporation, Ward explored possibilities of taking the matter to the International Court of Justice. When that didn't work, he worked on the People's Tribunal, Permanent People's Tribunal, and petitioned the UN. If there were some avenues that Ward did not tread, it was possibly because it was seriously illegal. If the Bhopal campaign survived through attempts to bury the disaster through the decade of the 90s, and news of it continued to be out there in the media, much of it is because of the dogged persistence of Ward and his ragtag band. Possibly over the years, disappointments began to weigh on him, but his optimism about actions continued to be contagious. I join you all in remembering Ward's humor, his eccentricities, his mobile headquarters, his bulging side bag, his combat uniform, khaki pants, white shirts, remembering those oddball artifacts, rubber bands made into balls, or rubber bands around his wrists, and so many others. Please feel free to join me in wishing that in the cosmic flow of all prana that goes out from all individuals on earth, may Ward, for all his good karma, for the good life that he lived, the good fights that he fought, get into some eddies where he commingles with all he loved, including all dogs, whose best friend he has been. And let us wish that all of us infuse ourselves with his rage against corporate authority.
Thank you, Paul. That truly was messages from the farthest.
That was from the farthest.
Charlie.